and welcome to another episode of our Caregiver series. Here with us today, we have Candace, and to begin, I will hand it over to her to introduce herself.
So I'm Candace. I run a blog called Our FTD Journey, and it's basically a caregiving blog. I've been taking care of my mother for nearly 8 years. She was diagnosed with frontal temporal dementia at the age of 57 years old. She's 64 now. So the blog kind of um, documents some of our, what we've been through. And, I also have it as a way to offer support to others.
Perfect. Thank you for the introduction. So my first question to start off, would you be able to walk us through the diagnosis process and what that was like for you when you first found out, and how you kind of dealt with that at the beginning and how it's been going since then?
So the diagnosis process was tough because it took about a couple of years to get it. She started. I'm not really sure like when her symptoms started. I tend to think she was having symptoms about 7 years before we even thought to get her checked. She Some of the outward signs that we started noticing, or I started noticing, was she had become aggressive and she developed a major sweet tooth. Um, she just, and honestly, I thought, that it was her bipolar acting up because she had been bipolar most of my life. So I thought, well, maybe she's just not taking her meds. And but then, there was starting to be issues with reading and writing and different things. So her psychiatrist was the first person to try to treat her, try to up her meds, thinking, same thing I thought, bipolar, and that wasn't working. And then she got referred to her primary physician, and primary physician did all the metabolic testing, thyroid testing, because my mom has had thyroid issues all her life. She's had her thyroid removed. Then she has like half of a parathyroid. So we thought, oh, maybe it's the thyroid. No, it wasn't the thyroid. Got B12 testing. B12 was fine. Everything on a metabolic panel, everything just came up fine. So then she got referred to the neurologist at UPenn. And that's when pretty much all the testing started, or the cognitive testing, and then when she failed at that, then she had a PET scan, and that's when the FTD diagnosis came.
And what was that like for you and adjusting to that, to becoming a caregiver and to care for your mom? I'm just curious about maybe what kind of resources you took advantage of at the beginning, or how you felt at the very beginning into that transition as a caregiver.
Well, being that my mom has been bipolar most of my life and on and off her meds most of my life, I've kind of sort of been a caregiver to her all my life. Only thing really that's different now is this is more final. There's no bouncing back from FTD. When she first got the diagnosis, I cried for like 3 months straight, like every day, because it was like, oh man, this is bad. And I had no idea what FTD was, so I had to start doing my research to figure out, okay, how can I help her? And so transitioning from taking care of her mental health needs to everything else was different, but uh but I transitioned to it fairly quickly.
And would you say that there were resources that you took advantage of that were helpful in the process, maybe learning a little bit more about FTD, resources in terms of care, just anything out there that you could potentially recommend to other caregivers, or anything you found helpful?
The one thing I tend to recommend to people is educate yourself. Don't go into caregiving being naive because, I went into it thinking, oh, it'll be fine, and I mean, it's okay, but it's hard. And about 2 years, maybe 3 years into caring for her, I started going to Alzheimer's seminars because I wanted to learn everything I could about dementia. And I had heard that, the Alzheimer's seminars um, do focus on other dementias. Their main focus is Alzheimer's. I really didn't learn much about FTD at those seminars, but when you come down to it, in the end, the result is the same no matter what kind of dementia it is. So I started going to those every year up until COVID hit, and then the face-to-face seminars were not happening anymore. Hopefully, maybe next year. But then I started doing webinars, and so webinars have been part of my job, like literally because I run the blog. I want to still be educating myself and learning stuff so I can take what I learn to other people who need the information. So sometimes I can do like 4 or 5 webinars a day. I just got off a 4 hour long webinar, not too long before this interview. So, um, and the stuff I learn, I post on social media to help others. So, and I use my own experiences with people.
Definitely. Um, is there any lessons or like, I guess I should rephrase, what are some of the biggest lessons that you would share with other caregivers that you've learned throughout this journey of taking care of your mom with dementia?
Have a routine. Routine is extremely important, but be flexible because every day is different. Any moment can be different. It's good to have a routine, but it's also important not to obsess over it. Don't become like a control freak. It's very easy to become a control freak. I mean, I can remember when I met the last aide that we used. We haven't used her really since COVID, but the last aide that we used for my mom, I remember when she first started coming around, uh, and I kept saying to her, "Well, this is this, and this is that, and this is what I do with my mom at this time of day, and blah 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 blah." She goes, "Okay, like relax. I know what I'm doing." So sometimes it's hard to hand over the reins because you're so used to certain things, but you just have to learn to be flexible and just kind of go with the flow because this is a kind of a ebb and flow kind of thing. Nothing really stays the same. So I guess I would also say don't get too comfortable because things can change drastically. Because when you think you have everything settled and you think you have your loved ones settled, then they enter some new phase, you know. I guess, and that's another point too, is they're gonna do a lot of things that might make you crazy because it's like, well, you didn't do this before. Well, they didn't have dementia before. And so they're gonna do a lot of things that makes you crazy, and you just gonna have to learn how to grow with thick skin because I can tell you right now, my mother early on went through a rummaging phase. She would go through things, and I was like, "Why are you doing this? Like, stop!" But then she would learn. But then she would find something else to move on to, and then when she got tired of that other thing, then she found another thing to move on to. So uh, just realize that a lot of what you will go through over the time that you're caregiving is everything mostly is a phase. If they're cussing, I guarantee you it may not last long or it just might lessen, but most things are definitely a phase.
Yeah, that's some really good advice. Definitely being adaptable in that difficult process. And in terms of self-care and caregiver burnout, are there certain things that you do for yourself throughout the day or any kind of self-care tips that maybe you could recommend to other caregivers?
Um, I like to drive and listen to music. Um, I do frequent support groups. I have probably like let's see, through the Alzheimer's Association, um, and like a couple of other groups. I probably go to about 4 or 5 support groups in a week, maybe, because I feel like it's important to stay connected with other people who are going through what you're going through. Because the truth of the matter is, if you're not going through this, you can't understand it. And so people have very little empathy for people like us because they're not going through it. Um, so sometimes when I'm in my support groups, I'll get in my truck and just drive to like a local park and sit by the water and you know, or just drive and uh listen to music. Um and working on the blog and social media stuff is actually sometimes relaxing. If I come across a topic that's triggering, then I will wait, to put up something sometimes. But um, as far as like trips or anything like that, I don't go away. I don't really like my mom's late stage, so I don't really like to be away from her a lot now that she's getting closer to the end.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your answer and for sharing that. Those were all of my questions, but I'm going to hand it over to Erica now to ask you a few more.
Okay.
Candace, thank you so much for sharing that with us. That's really insightful information. Um, you know, uh, can you tell us a little bit about what some of the activities that you do with your mother might look like, um, kind of on a day-to-day basis, or just like every now and then? What are some of the activities that both of you engage in?
Well, since COVID, I haven't really done a lot with her. I haven't taken her out. I used to take her and our dog out every day for a drive, as long as it was nice. I would take, but now since it's been about a year since she's been in the vehicle, I have to retrain her again how to get in and out of the vehicle, which is not anything really unusual because even when things were not shut down, and I wouldn't be able to take her out in the winter because it was too cold, and once it got warm, I always had to reteach her how to get back in the vehicle. Now, the question is, will I be able to do that? I don't know. I might end up having to actually get another vehicle because my truck might be too high for her now. So right now, I just kind of let her walk around the house sometimes, to keep her muscles going and keep her, from like severe atrophy. And music. She loves music. So she has headphones on all day long.
That's great. That's great to hear. And it seems like that's a shared interest with your mother and you.
Mhm.
What are some of the, are there any tools or resources or anything that you wish you had to make the caregiving experience easier?
I just wish I mean, that I had had people that were more understanding, and more willing to offer their time to give me some rest. Um, my friends and my mom's friends, 100% of them walked away, even her so-called best friend. And that, I was okay with the other ones walking away, and even put some in a situation where I was like, it's okay, you can just stay away. Um, but the best friend one really irked me, because I'm like, this is the person you say this is like your closest friend ever, and you just walk away. Like, you know, when her friend had cancer herself, I didn't walk away. My mom was sick. And I'm like, wow, okay. So it really, that time really helped me learn to filter out. You learn who your friends are and aren't through this experience. And so I think having boundaries, um, I wish it didn't take this experience for me to learn how to filter people out. I wish people had been more willing to come around, but I think, people hear dementia and they automatically think, oh, well, they're not going to remember anyway. And I think that's so horrible, because I never take for granted what my mom does or doesn't know. I'm always careful what I say around her. Um, I know that was probably a long trip around the sun to get to that answer, but I just, and that's part of why I started the blog. Well, we started the blog. It was really her idea, but I just want people to understand, like, dementia is not contagious. You can come around, you're not going to catch it. And if my mother doesn't remember you, so what? You know her. Sit and talk with her. She's still human.
That's great. That's true. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, um, Candace. And I guess the final question that I have for you is, you know, um, I guess, what do you enjoy about the caregiving experience? Are there any positive moments that you kind of reflect on with your mother?
I love that my mom, even in her late stage, is still so appreciative. She, her words are few now, but when she was earlier in her dementia, she used to say thank you all the time. Well, now she says it in other ways. And, I'm just so thankful that, she's calmed down a lot, where she's not as aggressive and combative like she used to be. So it gives me more time to really enjoy her now, rather than having to, argue with her. Um, but I mean, there's not much that I don't like about. I just don't like having to deal with other people when it comes to her. I think I would rather it just be her, I, and the dog, because I think, as much as there have been people who have walked away, there are still a couple of people who offer a lot of interference and difficulties where there shouldn't be. But outside of that, I mean, I really have enjoyed taking care of her over these years, and I think it has caused us to bond more than probably were been before she got sick. So I know not everybody could say that, but I actually think it's been a bonding experience for her and I. And so I'm thankful that I have had the opportunity to be able to take care of her, because not everybody doesn't have that advantage. For me, it's been a pleasure to take care of her, as difficult as it's been at times.
That's such a pleasure to hear, and thank you so much again for sharing that with us. It makes us happy to hear that as well. I think those are all the questions that we had for you today. So I think we'll wrap things up. So thank you so much for joining us on today's episode, and we'll see you in the next one.